flawless victory.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Flicks Files. If, like me in the early 90s, you were a very active gamer, I've been a gamer my whole life, I still am, you will remember there was a video game called Mortal Kombat that came out. And I bought this for the Super Nintendo, which was the console I had at the time. And I can still remember when it was released because there was a big marketing campaign for it. And the advert was a lot of people running around New York shouting Mortal Kombat to the skies. And they called it Mortal Monday. That was the day it was released. I still remember it really well. And I remember buying it and playing it and being a little disappointed that the Super Nintendo version didn't have the blood that the Sega Mega Drive / Genesis version had. But I enjoyed it all the same. And then I think the very next year they released Mortal Kombat 2, which doubled the fighting roster and had more moves and, you know, more fighting stages. And it was just overall a much better game. And it was around that time that I began to hear rumblings of a Mortal Kombat movie. And I can remember being slightly nervous because up till that point, the adaptations of video games into movies that had happened weren't that great. The first big one that I recall was the Super Mario Brothers movie with Bob Hoskins. And that was a real disappointment when I first saw it. I think it was directed by a couple in real life, Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel. And they were responsible for Max Headroom and the big craze of Max Headroom in the 80s. Yeah, and they kind of dropped the ball with it. It was a very odd design choice they had with like having Dennis Hopper as Bowser in it. And it was just very weird. And then the very next year after that was the Jean-Claude Van Damme Street Fighter movie. Which has the distinction of being the first movie I ever walked out of in a cinema. I've seen it since, and it did grow on me a little bit. So maybe as I get into extreme old age, I'll finally learn to love it. But I remember absolutely hating it when I first saw it. So when I heard that they were doing a Mortal Kombat movie, I can remember thinking, oh, you know, they've got to do it well for it to be any good. And it was released in the UK in October of 1995. And it's directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. Now, Paul W.S. Anderson has kind of etched out a career for himself doing a lot of Resident Evil movies with his wife, Milla Jovovich. And I think the most famous movies he's done is the science fiction movie Event Horizon, which strangely, even though I'm a huge science fiction fan, I'm not a massive fan of. I think it's like a terrible cross between like Alien and Hellraiser. And I'd rather keep both of those movies separate than have an amalgamation of the two. Yeah, so Event Horizon never really appealed to me that much. And I know it has a lot of fans. So, you know, kudos to you guys out there that enjoy that movie. But unfortunately, it didn't work for me. So Mortal Kombat was a fairly big hit when it came out. I've read that it was at the US box office #1 spot for 3 weeks straight, which is pretty good for like a medium, you know, a mid-budget movie. And it's only really got one big star, one bankable name, and that's Christopher Lambert. And he plays the lightning god Raiden. And certainly the parts where he's in the movie are really, really good, you know, and it's lovely to see him in the role.
Show me how. Oh, don't tell me you're afraid of a simple beggar.
the other actors, I think when I first saw it, there was only one that I recognised, and that was the actress that plays Sonya Blade. I think her name's Bridget Wilson, I think. And the only movie I saw her in prior to this was the Arnold Schwarzenegger film Last Action Hero. And she's in that for a small role. She plays his daughter in that movie. So what's this movie about? How can you have a movie based around a fighting game? Well, it does have a plot, but the plot is a very, very thin thread on which to hang a series of fights, because ultimately that's why we wanted to go and see the movie, was for the fights. And the plot revolves around an evil sorcerer called Shang Tsung. And he lives in the Outworld, which is like another dimension to Earth. And in the Outworld, they have a tournament called Mortal Kombat, which is overseen by the Emperor Shao Kahn. And if Shang Tsung wins 10 rounds of Mortal Kombat, then they get control over what they call the Earth Realm, which is basically Earth. And they won 9 rounds. So, as the movie starts, they've only got one more round to win. So that's the kind of basic plot of the movie. And we're introduced to the 3 main protagonists of the movie. The first one being Liu Kang. And when we first see Liu Kang, he has kind of a dream of seeing Shang Tsung kill his younger brother. So his drive for the movie is to get to Shang Tsung so he can, exact revenge for the death of his brother. And the second protagonist is Johnny Cage, who we first see in Hollywood, and he's working on an action film, and he's beating up a few stuntmen. And he's visited by one of his friends who tells him of this tournament that's going to be happening. And he tells him that if he goes to this tournament and fights, it would be good for his career. And as he walks away from that meeting, he morphs into Shang Tsung. So we see that, Shang Tsung is just trying to get Johnny Cage to fight in this tournament. And that's the first of the many dodgy effects that we'll see throughout the movie. And the third protagonist is Sonya Blade, who is kind of I think she's like a military policeman. And she's after another Mortal Kombat character called Kano. And she tracks him down to this shipyard where he's boarding this very exotic, oriental-looking sail ship. And it's the very same ship that Johnny Cage and Liu Kang are getting on board to go to this fighting tournament. Well, Sonya Blade doesn't really know anything about this fighting tournament. She's just after Kano. So she gets on board the ship as well to get Kano. So ultimately, the 3 of them are now on this ship and will sail into the Outworld. And it's there that they first meet Christopher Lambert as Raiden. And Raiden explains, what's happening and how there's a tournament and there's only one more round to play, and it's imperative that they win it to stop Shang Tsung taking control of Earth, which leads to what's possibly the funniest line in the whole movie.
One of you 3 will decide the outcome of the tournament. The fate of billions will depend upon you. Sorry.
There's quite a few things I like about this movie. Firstly, it is a good-looking movie. The set design and the look of Outworld when they get there is really well done, and it really invokes the feel of the computer games, if you know the computer games really well. And the characters in the movie, the fighters that we see from the game that appear in the movie, look like their characters in the game. Is great. So when we first see Sub-Zero and when we first see Scorpion, they look as if they've just come directly from the video game. Exactly the same outfits and the colors of their outfits. Even Goro, which in the game, he's a big sort of, 8-foot beast with 4 arms. He's in the movie. And obviously, this is the very early days of CGI, and they couldn't quite stretch to having a CGI Goro. But they have this full animatronic Goro. The full upper half of the body and the head is animatronic, and it's fantastic, you know. And even now, it's still like 30 years later, it still looks really decent. You know, it looks really, really good. So yeah, there's a lot of things to like about this movie visually. And it's fair to say that the reason people went to see this movie was for the fights. And the movie has a lot of fights. And there are two fights in particular that are standout, which I'll explain and talk about. And so, yeah, it's really good. I would say, other than a few dodgy CGI shots, because, you know, this would have only been a few years after Jurassic Park. And Jurassic Park was Industrial Light and Magic and the high end of computer-generated effects in the early 90s. This was a more medium to low budget. So they tried a few CGI shots, and they kind of work. But like Reptile, you see Reptile in like his true form, where he's like a little lizard. And he just looks badly textured and almost cartoonish when you see him. And he's not that great. But there are other effects in it, certainly the effects around Sub-Zero when he freezes things. And, you know, they come across quite well. So it is a mixture. So if you're watching this movie for the first time, you have to kind of rein in your expectations of what you're going to be seeing in terms of visual effects. I think they did well for the money that they had to play with. So, you know, the fight to this movie is why we're here. And one of the first great fights takes place between Johnny Cage and Scorpion. And this is another thing I like, is that they have lots of callbacks to the game in terms of moves that they do. Liu Kang does his bicycle kick move, and Scorpion has a move where he fires like a spear. And in the game, he would throw a spear at somebody, impale them with it, and then pull them towards it and say, "Get over here! Come here!" And all that's in the movie, you know, and it's really nice when you see it actually come to life.
Get over here!
Johnny Cage and Scorpion have a fight, and the fight takes them onto some sort of rickety scaffolding. And it's fair to say that Scorpion kicks the shit, sorry for my language, out of Johnny Cage. To the point that you think, oh my God, you know, this is getting quite aggressive. And then he ends up trying to pull a fatality on him, which again is lifted straight out of the game, where Scorpion pulls his mask off to reveal that he's got a skull face. And then he like breathes fire down onto Johnny Cage. And Johnny Cage finds like a shield or something to block the flames. And then he throws a spear at Scorpion that grazes his skull, which eventually makes him explode into a million pieces. You know, and it's a great sequence. And then, you know, all the fights take place. But I would say the best fight sequence in the movie, which is easily the best part of the movie for me, is the plot gets to a point where Shang Tsung kidnaps Sonya Blade and imprisons her at the top of this very tall tower in Outworld. And Johnny Cage and Liu Kang have to wander deeper into Outworld to rescue her. And while they go into the depths of Outworld, they come across Reptile in his lizard form. And Liu Kang catches him and throws him to the ground, into like a rotting corpse that's on the ground. And it's there that Reptile sort of reanimates this corpse and turns into the Reptile that we know from the video games. And thus starts this huge fight sequence, which I'm going to try and include a big clip of it here. But we'll see if we get a copyright strike with the music that's playing over it. So we'll give it a go. So yeah, so that's a taster of the terrific fight that happens between Liu Kang and the reptile. And as I say, Robin Shou, who plays Liu Kang, did all of the fight choreography, and he did an absolutely terrific job. And the fights still hold up now. I mean, I think the only thing where the movie could have been better is if they upped the violence a little bit more. But I guess they were aiming for a wider audience. And unlike the newer Mortal Kombat movie that came out just a few years ago, which did, have all the gore and effects that we were expecting, they were trying to make this movie more widely accessible. So, you're not going to get the full head-ripping, spine-pulling, moves that you expect from the game.
Finish it.
But the movie's still good for it, I think. And I'm not going to give the ending away because it does involve another fight. And, I won't say who that fight is between. But it's worth a watch. And if you did play Mortal Kombat back in the day and you were a big fan of it, I would definitely say give this a go because you'll probably really like it. And if you did like it and you've not seen the new Mortal Kombat that came out just a few years ago, then certainly give that a go. Because that is sort of, as a true Mortal Kombat movie should be, with the real violence and the really gory fatalities. And I've heard that they've already finished filming Mortal Kombat 2, which is the same director as the recent Mortal Kombat movie. I think it's a chap called Simon McQuoid, who is a music video director. And he did a terrific job. So I'm really looking forward to the Mortal Kombat 2 movie. And I hear that Carl Urban, the actor Carl Urban, is Johnny Cage in it. So that's another good reason to want to see it. So yeah, I mean, in terms of new video game adaptations, there's only a few others that I would recommend if you've not seen them. One of them is the Tomb Raider movie with Alicia Vikander. I really liked that film, and I thought it captured the latest series of Tomb Raider games really well. And Alicia Vikander is physically capable as Lara Croft. And there was talk they were going to do a sequel to that movie, but unfortunately, it looks like that's not going to happen. I think they're now working on a limited TV series for Amazon Prime, so we'll see how that turns out. But I think the best video game adaptation I've seen thus far is the new Super Mario Brothers movie. And I saw that earlier this year and absolutely loved it. I just adored it. And I'm not really a fan of CGI Pixar films. I've got the Toy Story movies, but that's it. I don't have any of the others. But I really liked the Super Mario Brothers movie. And when I heard that Chris Pratt was going to be doing the voice of Mario, I thought, oh God, surely that's not going to work. But it works really well and he does a terrific job. So suffice to say, I did buy it on Blu-ray and I've got it in my collection. So again, if you like Nintendo video games and you've not seen the new Super Mario Brothers movie, then give it a go because it will really surprise you. And it's a really nice, good movie that has a lot of excellent callbacks to the games. So there we are. So that's Mortal Kombat from 1995. I hope you enjoyed this video and, the bit that I've talked about it and the clips that I've shown you has encouraged you to want to go and see it if you haven't seen it at this point. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. I upload videos every Tuesday and Friday, by the way. So yeah, give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon.